are very valuable for telling when a time was. These are, but some objects don't change in shape. For example, these are 2,000-year-old cooking pots. They look just like our cooking pots. Iron and bronze tools were melted to use for other tools, so that's not so good. But fine dinnerware and other objects, such as these oil lamps, do change in time very quickly. And by analyzing their shapes, the clay they're made of, the firing processes, and the decorations, they can pretty well take it to quite an exact time. And why is pottery so important? Well, everybody had pottery. And you can plate it. It's very hard to grind it to dust. I was taking pottery lessons for quite a number of years, and my teacher always said, this bowl is going to last hundreds of years beyond you. If it's not perfect, throw it away and make another one. Another item for dating are coins. This is Alexander the Great. Coins always have a date on them, but they weren't used until the 6th century BC, and they remain in circulation for a long time. So it's just helpful, but not really important. What you want, these are written inscriptions on pieces of pottery called ostraka. And we have, this is carbonized papyrus. In Pompeii, when they began with scientific archaeology in 1860, they found these very weird empty spaces as they were digging. They had the brilliant idea to pour liquid plaster of Paris, and they found these spaces were people whose bodies had disintegrated over the 2,000 years. So we were allowed this summer into a workroom. This is one of the bodies that they had, plaster of Paris, and they're now making fiberglass molds of all these bodies. So that, I don't know if you can see, this is the feet, the knees, the legs, the heads over here. I don't work on this. This is just what we were privileged to be able to see. But what we do work on is an oven. This is, we're looking at anything connected in the city with food. We are very excited when we see an oven. This was a big commercial oven. The bread that I showed you, the carbonized bread, was found in an oven like this. And this is just a picture of one page of our database. Everything we do is, there's a description, there should be a photograph here, a floor plan here, a photograph, and a drawing. So that's what we do. We don't do any excavation at all. in Herculaneum, which is the next town over, and was not covered with ash as Pompeii was, but with lava. As I said, 50 feet of lava. So everything was preserved much, much more brilliantly. The problem is, this is the old part that has been excavated. There's only about 4 blocks in the city. The problem is, this up here is the new part, rotty apartments. The people that live there would wish these archaeologists would just go away, leave them alone. The problem is, they're right over the archaeological site. And until now, there could be no digging. But they found in some of these apartments, the basements are 3 feet away from the buildings underneath, and a couple of them caved in. So they are realizing now, we have a lot of work to do here. In Herculaneum, Packard, who is not a Hewlett-Packard company, but he is somehow related, he came to Herculaneum a few years ago and has created a Packard Humanities Institute to pay for conservation. What they have done now is taken one whole block, and they're going to restore it to the way it was. It was dug up in the 18th century, and in 1930, they tried to restore it because it was starting to fall apart. They ran out of money, so now Mr. Packard is in the picture. And they're finding all kinds of very, very interesting things. One thing they found is a basilica, which they are now in the process of excavating. I don't know if you've heard of the Villa of the Papyrus. The Getty Villa in California is modeled after this structure in Herculaneum. The problem is, nobody really knows what it looks like. They had 2 rooms excavated, and then they did tunnels, and on that basis is what the Getty Villa is based. This is the suburban baths of Herculaneum, which you can see is kind of falling apart. And here is, they're doing 3D laser scanning. So they take this instrument and take pictures of the entire building.
Buzz, is that tile?
Tile?
The floor?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's all mosaics and all kinds of stuff. Very, very fancy. Now we come to, oh, this is just a picture of the same instrument, but in Pompeii. We're much more colorful, as you can see. It's also out in the hot sun. But this is, somebody is doing this 3D laser scanning of the entire forum. Then we get to underwater archaeology. I passed out a book list, and there's a book called Dragon Sea that I think everybody should read. It's by Frank Mohalley. It's about a ship that was found in the South China Sea off the coast of Vietnam. Frank Mohalley was one of the archaeologists who was connected with this project. It was a real archaeology project where they systematically were documenting everything that they found. But the problem was it was being financed by a Chinese guy who wanted to get all the objects from this ship and sell them and make a profit. Well, so there was a big conflict, which you can read about in the book. It's just a very readable book. Vietnam and China had been enemies for thousands and thousands of years. China had imposed their own culture onto the Vietnamese, especially how they made their beautiful porcelain. There was one space in these thousands of years, for about 80 years, in the 1400s, when Vietnam was free of China, and they became independent and loosened up. They started making pottery not the way the Chinese had made it, which was to replicate exactly what had been done before. If you were a good Chinese ceramicist, you copied something from the previous century. Exactly. You did not deviate. Well, when the Vietnamese started doing their own pottery, they would take a person and put a smile on his face, just little things like that, that made it much more distinctive. Well, this ship was found off the sea of Vietnam. It was laden with pottery. So the Chinese guy was pushing, please, don't bother with so much documentation, bring it up. Well, they brought so much up that they overflooded the market, and nobody wanted to buy it because it wasn't so distinctive. They went to eBay and tried to sell it on eBay. Now everybody sells this on eBay now, but this was about 5 years ago when that was a hot thing to do. People still didn't buy it. This Chinese man lost millions of dollars in this project. They gave all the Vietnamese pottery back to Vietnam. They built a special museum to hold it. They have so many objects, they have no room for it all. So that's what happens. You can have it. Then we get to our country, and there's a group called the Marine Odyssey Exploration. In 2003, they excavated the SS Republic off the Florida coast, which had sunk in the Civil War time. There's a movie. It's based on it stars Nicolas Cage. I tried to download their promo from my computer, and my computer started doing such weird things. I thought I better turn this off and forget I ever tried. So this is the newspaper ad. Somehow this movie, which is made by Disney, is connected with the Marine Odyssey Exploration Group. On their website, they have a treasure game for 10 weeks, I guess it must be over now. It started in January, no, in December. It's probably still on. Where you can pilot their remote vehicles. Every week they have a different treasure hunt, and they are giving coins from this USS Republic that they had dug up in 2003. And the grand prize of this treasure hunt is a Mercedes. But this group is in the news nowadays because they also excavated a ship off the coast of Gibraltar. They are Americans. They are saying they found it, it's therefore theirs. The Spanish are saying it's their ship, and they have a name, they know the name of the ship. The American group is not agreeing that this is that particular Spanish ship. They've just given it the name, the Black Swan. So, the Spanish are saying it's their ship. The Brits are saying it's their ship because it was off the coast of Gibraltar. The Peruvians are saying it was originally their gold, so it's theirs. The gold is worth $500 million. So this is why everybody's interested in it. And you can read about all this stuff almost every day in the newspaper. The gold is right now in an undisclosed warehouse in Disney, Florida, because everybody is suing everybody else. Now, there are laws against all this, but they're not really very specific. The law of salvage says that the person who finds this ship must prove that the wreck was abandoned by the previous owner. Now, how do you do that? They also have to prove that it's in marine peril. But as I said, once a ship sinks and gets covered up by all the silt, it remains that way. It's not in peril. It stays that way. What has been suggested is that the courts, rather than making the salvager do all the proving, the courts should assume that it's better off left alone, and that the salvagers have to prove it would be much better if it's recovered. There is a property clause in the U.S. Constitution that says the government owns any military craft. So salvagers cannot go after warships. There's also been attempts at making global laws. The United Nations had a conference in 1982, and UNESCO made a big proposal for the protection of underwater cultural heritage in 2001, which bans commercial exploitation and prohibits selling artifacts from historic shipwrecks. However, I don't know how many countries are now in the United Nations, but only 16 of them have signed on to this, and it can't be ratified until 20 countries sign, so it's just about meaningless. Needless to say, all the big countries have not signed on, such as the United States, Britain, China, It's the little ones like Cambodia that sign. That's about my talk. I take any questions.
How do you preserve the ice man once we remove him from that cold?
Well, he's kept in a case that's humidified, you know, and he's kept in the conditions that he was found in. That's the thing with all these kind of oddities, that you have to keep them in the condition where they were found, or they start, when they're supposed to be air, they just start disintegrating right